Continuing our reading in Abraham Hannibal and the Battle for the Throne by Francis Summers Cox, Chapter 20, The Coldest Winter. The date is October 1708 to April 1709. The Swedes settled into a cluster of small towns and villages in the rich, fertile south. Here at least there was still food in the sheds and barns. The Russians set up their own winter headquarters in a curve of small towns between the Swedes and the way to Moscow. As autumn gave way to winter, the two armies waited. For once, Peter decided to take the lead. Time and time again, he sent out small groups of horsemen, dashing across the frozen rivers and streams to harass the edges of the Swedish camps and tempt the Swedish soldiers out. Each time, the Swedes found that the Russian army simply melted away. There was no battle, and they had left their firesides for nothing, all ragged and weak as they were. At last, in December, the whole Swedish army were tempted out from their camps onto the open road, hoping to catch the Russians by surprise, but instead, the Swedes found themselves facing a new and unexpected enemy. All over Europe that winter was the coldest in living memory. The River Thames froze in London, the River Seine in Paris, so that horses and wagons could pass across. In the palace of the Sun King, wine turned to ice at table, and the nobles forgot fashion, muffling themselves up in thick cloaks and furs, huddling around huge log fires that could barely warm the vast and splendid rooms. Reindeer and boar froze to death in the forests, cows and sheep in the fields, rabbits and weasels in their holes. Squirrels and birds fell dead at the trees. Windmills were frozen stiff and would not turn, so that the wheat could not be ground for bread. And people died of hunger as well as cold. In the huge, empty, wind-swept plains to the south of Russia, it was far worse still. There are no mountains, no barriers at all between you and the North Pole, and the icy winds come blasting straight from the Arctic Ocean. In December, Peter tempted the whole of Charles' army out into this freezing hell, leaving them stranded in the howling white wastes to fight a ghost army that vanished before them. For 3 days, the Swedes struggled to get back through the narrow gates of the town, freezing stiff as if they sat on horseback or in wagons, dying of cold as they marched, or starving and surviving only to lose their fingers and toes and noses to frostbite. Even Abraham thought Charles had been foolish to risk his men so needlessly, and he was not sorry to stay indoors as he peeped through the little double windows of their inn at the murderous whiteness outside, a snowstorm blasting fiercely up and down the alleyway. He often thought of the story he had heard so long ago in the slave market at Istanbul about the young African general who once upon a time challenged the whole Roman Empire. Fighting a human enemy is one thing, but imagine Hannibal marching into Italy in winter, facing those terrible mountains, facing snow and ice and bitter winds like this, with those poor soldiers and horses and elephants who'd only ever known African sun and warmth. I'd rather fight 10 men single-handed than be out in this, but Hannibal did it. What makes people go on? What makes them not give up? And yet, before the winter was over, Charles got his troops moving, attacking divisions of the Russian army, scorching the earth after them so that it would be hard for the Russians to follow. But then he was halted by a different kind of weather, a sudden thaw, so that men, horses, wagons, and cannons sank into the mud and melted snow. In any case, Peter was avoiding battle whenever possible. He was well satisfied with his waiting game. "We can wait as long as Charles waits," he said one evening in the inn where his team was staying. "We can get all the supplies we want from Moscow. Food, ammunition, decent uniforms. The longer we wait, the more Charles' army turns into a bunch of scarecrows. They're nothing but rags to wear. Their boots are falling to pieces, and from what I hear, they've hardly enough dry powder to make them worthwhile carting their cannon along with them. We've got them every which way. They can wait here, getting weaker, or they can make an attempt on Moscow, but they're far too small and weak a force now for that. Or they can go back to their friends in Poland. Whichever way, Moscow's safe. For this year, anyway. Abraham thought, but didn't say, that from what he'd heard of the Swedish king, he would never go back. He was not the kind to give up, not when his army had got so far. What Charles actually did surprise everybody. He didn't go back, and he didn't go forward. Instead, he moved his army far down to the southwest, further away from Moscow, but nearer the friendly forces that he was expecting to join him, Muslims from the Tsar's territories, who loathed being ruled by Russians, Muslims from the Sultan's empire, and also an army from the friendly king of Poland. He made his camp near a small town in the south called Poltava. Few people had heard of Poltava then. It became a name few people would forget. That's the end of chapter 20.